Hello, everybody. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this Wellness Wednesday Live. My name is Dalila Valdovinos, and I am the youth organizer and trauma clinician at CHAS Center's La Vida Partnership. And this month, we are celebrating Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Once again on this Wellness Wednesday Live, where we will be discussing a little bit about sexual assault and also consent, right? That's going to be the main topic for today. We will be discussing what consent is. We will learn a little bit more about how we can talk to our children about consent. And we will also be learning about ways that we can better support survivors of sexual assault and be able to help those who have experienced this. So we will be giving people first a little bit of time to log in case you haven't gotten your coffee or your tea yet. We will give you a little bit of time to join us. I also want to remind you that Wellness Wednesday Lives are held every second Wednesday of the month in English and the third Wednesday of the month in Spanish. So we welcome all of you to join us to learn about these important topics that are going to be important for us to learn a little bit more about ourselves and how we can improve our health or continue to have great and healthy lives. So we'll just give you a little bit of more time to join in. I'm really excited to be able to do this workshop with all of you today, because I think that sexual assault is something that maybe in our community may be seen as something taboo or something that might be uncomfortable to talk about, but it's important to have these conversations, right? So today we will be discussing that a little bit further. Feel free to ask questions, and we will be making sure to keep track of them and answer them as we go, okay? All right, so I think we've given a little bit of time for you to grab your coffee, your tea, get comfortable. So we are going to get started now with the presentation. So once again, welcome to this Wellness Wednesday Live. I'm really excited to be here talking to you. For those of you that are just now logging in, my name is Dalila Valdovinos, and I am the youth organizer and trauma clinician with CHAS Center's La Vida Partnership. And we will be discussing this month's special event that we celebrate here at CHAS Center with the La Vida Partnership, which is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So before I get started, I'd like to talk a little bit about I would like to talk a little bit about CHAS Center in general, right? Because a lot of us might be familiar with where CHAS Center is located, but some of us might have never visited before, and we'd love to welcome you here. So CHAS Center is located on the corner of 4th Street and Junction in Southwest Detroit. And CHAS Center is a federally qualified health center. So we're kind of like a one-stop shop center for a lot of different services that pertain to your family's health. So we offer services, not just medical, but we also have a dental office, we have a WIC office, we have a pharmacy. So it really makes it easy for somebody who's coming to get medical services to also access a lot of other services without having to leave or to have to find different providers, right? We're all in one place. We also have mental health services, which I think is very important as a part of CHAS, that is recognizing that mental health is just as important as physical health, right? And so one of the services that CHAS offers is the La Vida Partnership Program, which is the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Prevention and Support Program. And so it's really nice that we are a program of CHAS Center because we are able to offer safe services for survivors, safe and confidential. It makes it a lot easier and a lot less intimidating to seek help if you are a survivor of domestic violence or sexual assault, to come to a place like CHAS, because you know that there's so many other services that maybe if somebody sees that you're seeking services here, they might not assume that you are a survivor, right? You might not have to disclose that you're a survivor or feel embarrassed or anything like that, because there's so much more that CHAS offers. So it really helps to keep that privacy and confidentiality safe. So it also offers a great way for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault to seek safe services, because they can maybe talk to their provider about it, or maybe if they're seeking dental services or WIC services, or are here with our O&E program, right, talking to somebody about how they can apply for insurance. They can also mention that they're experiencing maybe domestic violence or sexual assault, and they'll be able to connect them with somebody that can provide the help that they might need. In terms of the La Vida partnership services, our services are of no cost to families. All of our services are private and confidential, and we offer counseling starting at the age of 5 years old. We know that somebody's self-esteem has already started to develop at the age of 5. And so it's really important for us to start that counseling, even though we might think that they're super young, they might not know what's going on. The reality is that children are very, very smart, and they understand what's going on at home just by seeing the parents' body language, right? Tone. So it's really important that we also seek counseling for little ones, because we want to make sure that they understand what a healthy relationship does look like and not normalize unhealthy relationships and behaviors, right? And that they also have a safe space to talk about how they're feeling and to understand those feelings and develop a healthy self-esteem. So we offer counseling for younger children at the age of 5 and up if they have witnessed domestic violence, and also for youth and adults that have either witnessed or experienced domestic violence and or sexual assault. And you don't necessarily have to be experiencing the abuse at the moment. Maybe you experienced this 5, 10, 20 years ago, right? Regardless of when you experienced it. And if you're ready to talk about it and you would like to talk to somebody about the abuse, the trauma that you experienced, you can definitely contact CHAS Center and La Vida Partnership. It's whenever the survivor is ready, right, to talk about this. So there is no time frame for it. We also offer holistic legal advocacy services for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. We also have financial stability and education courses, and we offer prevention services and programming for youth. Once again, we think that it's really important to be able to provide that information on what healthy relationships look like and what somebody deserves in a relationship, right? What somebody deserves in a healthy relationship. And so we try to talk to youth about these issues early on so that they normalize these healthy behaviors. And lastly, we also have a support group in Spanish for women called Amigas. We are currently not meeting in person, but hopefully once things are a little bit safer to do so, we will be. But that's just a little bit of our programming. We also have a youth board called the Youth Board of the La Vida Partnership, and we meet once a month. It's a very fun program for youth ages 14 to 24, where they are able to develop and enrich some of those leadership skills that they already have, and they're able to educate other peers about what healthy relationships are. So it's a very fun program. Also, if you're interested in any of these programs, feel free to contact us or ask any questions as we go. So let's talk a little bit about what sexual assault is, right? So it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And although we should be talking about this on our day-to-day basis all year round, it's really important to bring this message across during this special month so that we can bring that awareness to the community, right? We can have these conversations with our peers, with our children, family members. So what is sexual assault? Sexual assault can be defined as any sexual contact or behavior that forces someone to do something sexually that they did not give consent to. And the key word here is consent, right? When someone is not giving their permission, their consent to do any kind of sexual assault, any kind of sexual act, that is sexual assault. So sexual assault, it's really important to remember that it is also a crime based on power and control. It's when somebody wants to have that power and control over somebody else, and therefore is not respecting them, is not respecting their consent, right? Some of these examples of what sexual assault can look like include unwanted touching, kissing, forcing someone to do sexual acts, rape or attempted rape, sexual contact with someone that cannot give consent, and using sexual insults towards your partner, right? And it's important to also remember that sexual assault can also happen within a marriage, right? Within a, not necessarily even a marriage, but even like a dating couple with your partner. Sexual assault can also happen with your partner. Sexual abuse can also take the form of coercion, such as refusing to use condoms, tampering or restricting your partner's use of contraceptives, and keeping someone from protecting themselves from STIs. And this is also a way for somebody to continue that power and control. So now I would like to discuss a few myths and facts. And these are myths that we've maybe heard from the community or from family and friends, right? And that's why it's important to discuss them, because it's something that maybe you've even heard before from family and friends or just peers. So one of the biggest myths related to sexual assault is that most sexual assaults are committed by strangers, right? So sometimes we get this idea from social media, from the movies, TV shows that we see, that maybe sexual assault happens when a stranger pops out of the bushes as you're walking late at night in a downtown city area and sexual assault occurs. The reality is that the majority of sexual assaults are committed by somebody that we know, somebody that we already trust, that we already confide in. So there was a study that was done, and many other studies that have shown that 80% of women that reported sexual assault at one point in their lifetime knew the assailant. They knew the aggressor. So this can maybe look like a neighbor, a coworker, a friend, a family member, somebody from a church, possibly a classmate, your partner, your ex-partner. It's somebody that we already know and we confide in. Another large myth that we see often is that sexual assault can be avoided if people stay away from dangerous places or stay out late. Right, and we hear this a lot as well, or we might see this in movies, where it might happen if we are out late, or if we were doing something that people might say we weren't supposed to be doing, right? Like maybe drinking alcohol or something like that. The reality is that sexual assault does not discriminate. This can happen to anybody, right? Regardless of somebody's age, race, ethnicity, physical strength, sexual orientation. It can happen to somebody that lives in a rural area. It can happen to somebody that lives in a city, regardless of class, economic status. This can happen at any time of the day and in any place. And many sexual assault crimes usually happen somewhere where we felt safe. Once again, whether that's like in the home, at a relative's home, at the babysitter's, at a church. It's a place where we already feel safe. So another big myth is that sexual assault is provoked by dressing provocatively and or behaving in a promiscuous manner, or like I mentioned previously, doing something that people say we weren't supposed to be doing, right? And so this is very problematic because this leads to a lot of victim blaming, putting the blame on the survivor. And so the fact is that sexual assault is never the survivor's fault. The survivor was never asking for this crime to happen to them, regardless of how they were dressing and what they were doing, how they were behaving, right? No one asks for this crime. Regardless if maybe they were even influenced by drugs or alcohol, right? Which is something that I hear a lot. Like, well, maybe she shouldn't have been drinking. Maybe she shouldn't have been doing this, right? Or he shouldn't have been drinking or doing that. So a lot of blame can sometimes be put on the survivor when these comments are made, right? So another big myth is that most survivors of sexual assault make a report right away, right? That they will call the police right away, go to the hospital right away, call 911 right away. And the reality is that rape is the least reported violent crime in the United States, with 90% of sexual victims on college campuses not reporting the crime. And this can be caused by many, many barriers, right? A lot of the times people are concerned that they're not going to believe them, that somebody, if they speak to somebody about this, that they're not going to believe that that happened to them, that they're going to question their validity. They also fear for their safety, that if they do talk to somebody about this, that the aggressor finds out that the aggressor might seek revenge. They might also feel ashamed or embarrassed, and that also goes hand in hand with somebody not believing them. If we are knowing that sexual assault typically tends to happen with people that we know, that we confide in, maybe a family member, it might bring embarrassment, it might bring feelings of shame, and it might make people think, well, they're not going to believe me because this is my uncle, this is my aunt, this is my grandfather or my grandmother. And so a lot of feelings of shame or embarrassment can also arise from that, and also be a barrier for somebody to talk about it. There also is a fear of being blamed for the abuse, right? Going back to this victim blaming piece. Well, maybe you shouldn't have been dressed that way, or maybe you shouldn't have been out so late, or you shouldn't have been hanging out with those people or gone to that party. When in reality, as we learned, sexual assault can happen to anybody, regardless of their age, regardless of how they were dressed. It can happen to babies in diapers, right? So, and that's not to say that they were dressed provocatively, right? So there comes a lot of blame for the survivor, and that might be a barrier. There's also barriers for the Latinx community. Sometimes we might feel that if we are undocumented, then that we might not have rights, but the reality is that we do have rights, especially when it comes to a crime. You can report it, you do have rights. And so a lot of the times people might not report because they might be fearful of engaging with law enforcement or engaging with other systems. So now to kind of talk a little bit about consent and understand it a little bit further, right? Because in reality, when there is consent, that's a healthy sexual act, right? That's a healthy relationship. When there isn't consent, that's sexual assault. So let's understand a little bit more about what consent is. And I have a video for you. I hope that you can hear it. It's called the Teacup video of consent, and you can look it up on YouTube as well, and we will have the link below. But let me show that to you. And I think it's a very humorous video. It's funny, but at the same time, it makes sense. It makes sense. And even though they're talking about sexual assault in a different context, it kind of, at the end of the video, you'll see like, well, if it makes sense this way, then why does it sometimes not make sense when we talk about sexual assault, right? It does. It's clear. So let me show the video.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they go, oh my God, I would love a cup of tea. Thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, not really sure. Then you can make them a cup of tea or not. But be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea. At all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please. That's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes, but in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, but you wanted tea last week. Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, but you wanted tea last night. But if you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
So I hope that you enjoyed.
Just imagine.
I hope that you enjoyed this video a little bit, and it sounds silly, right? It sounds a little bit silly after we listen to that, and it's like, well, duh, that really makes sense when it comes to a cup of tea, right? And so the same thing goes for any kind of sexual act. And when we think about our day-to-day, we ask for consent for everything, right? In our day-to-day, and it's something that we just kind of know. So for example, if I'm at home with my husband, right? And I don't know, he's on the computer, he's on the laptop, but I also need to use the laptop. I don't just take it from him and snatch it while he's typing up an email, right? I will ask him and say, are you almost done? I also need to use the laptop. Can I use it when you're done, right? And so we ask for consent for in the workplace, at home, with our children. And so we ask for consent on a day-to-day basis. And sexual acts are just one more reason to ask for consent, right? And so what is consent? From what we learned from the video, consent is that communication piece, right? Being able to communicate in a clear way, right? Communicating clearly what we don't want, what we do want, and never assuming consent on somebody, never assuming that somebody did consent or did not consent. If we're assuming and we're wondering and we have to make a guess, then that's not clear consent. And so a silence does not mean consent, right? We can assume that if somebody didn't say yes or didn't say no, they were silent, they couldn't respond even, then that is not consent. We cannot assume it. And so consent not only is about that clear communication, but it's also a continuous communication, right? It has to be followed through every step of the way, because maybe I consented to some sexual act, but that didn't mean that I consented to everything else or all other sexual acts, right? So it has to be continuously asked. It also has to be coherent, right? So by that, we have to make sure that if somebody is consenting, that they're able to answer the questions, who, what, why, where, when. If they can't answer those questions, then that means that they are not able to consent. And it also has to be willing. So somebody has to willingly be consenting, right? Without pressure, without feeling forced or intimidated to do so. And lastly, consent is also reversible. So maybe I consented to one sexual act, right? But then after exploring a little bit, I realized that no, actually, I don't want to consent to this. It's reversible. I can take that back, right? I can take that consent back and say, no, I'm not consenting to this any longer. And it should be respected, right? So now that we learned a little bit about what sexual assault is, we learned about what sexual assault is not, right? We talked about consent. How do we now have these conversations with our children? It can be very uncomfortable, right? And it's normal for it to be uncomfortable because maybe we never had those conversations with our parents or with our caregivers. And so how do we have these conversations with our children if maybe it's something that's uncomfortable for us? It's never too soon. It's never too soon to talk about consent with our children, right? And that's a very great start point because, as I mentioned previously, we ask for consent for anything, right? Even while they're in school, they're asking for consent, right? With their classmates, with their teachers, they can't just take somebody's pencil from them. They have to ask for the pencil first, right? And so being able to ask for consent and knowing that their consent is also respected by you and other family members is a great start point. And that can start from, the time that they're toddlers, very young babies. If maybe you're giving your baby a bath or a shower, right? Asking them like, is it okay if mommy teaches you how to do this? You want to do this on your own? Asking different questions, right? So that you can get their consent and also teach them that their consent is respected. Also, talking to your children about the proper names of their body parts is a great start point that can start from the time that they're born, right? When you talk about their penis and their vagina, saying those terms, right? Those biological terms, penis and vagina. Because a lot of the times, and I know culturally, sometimes we will have nicknames for body parts because it's uncomfortable sometimes to say the word penis and vagina because maybe we don't really say it often or we don't hear it often. And so it kind of sounds a little bit silly and uncomfortable, but it's really important to use those proper terms because if our child were to tell us that they're experiencing something, right? Or tell somebody else, maybe we know the terms that they use. Maybe they use, I've heard different terms, right? Like the birdie, the cookie, I don't know, on and on and on, right? We could talk about a bunch of different terms, but if maybe my son or daughter were to tell their teacher, right, something related to their birdie, then the teacher might not understand what they're talking about, when in reality, they're disclosing sexual assault, right? And so we want to make sure that anybody else who listens to this message from their child or their student or this child in general, that they're able to give them the help that they need if they disclose anything like that and not maybe minimize it or not understand what the message is. So it's important to have that proper terminology, right? It's also okay to let them know that if they say no to something that makes them feel uncomfortable, that you're okay with that and that it's okay for them to say, no, I don't feel comfortable. A lot of the times we might ask our children to give their aunt or uncle a hug or a kiss on the cheek or sit on uncle or aunt's lap, right? Because we might do it off of respect or because it's family tradition. But if that child doesn't feel comfortable doing those things, it's important to let them know that you're respecting their no. If they say, no, I don't want to, or they don't feel comfortable, and not pressuring them to do certain things that they're not okay with. It's also important to talk to your children about secrets and letting them know that secrets are not okay. A lot of the times, perpetrators will use secrets as a form to prevent them from talking and disclosing about the sexual assault, right? They might make it seem like it's a game. This is a game between you and I. Only you and I know about this. It's so much fun. It's our little secret, right? You can't tell anybody because it's our little secret. It's part of the game. And so this can be very problematic because then they might not disclose. They might be afraid, right, to tell somebody else what's going on. So letting your child know that secrets are not okay, and that if somebody tells you that you have a secret with them, let me know. You need to talk to me about it, right, as a parent. And definitely being a safe place for your child is crucial, right? Letting them know that they can trust you, that you're somebody that is trustworthy, that they can talk to you about these things, and that if they were to tell you that they're experiencing sexual assault, that you believe them, regardless of who it might be that is causing this to them, that you believe them, and that they are somebody that you can trust, right? That you are somebody that they can trust, that you will believe them, that you will listen to them, acknowledge their feelings, and not blame them, right? Or not doubt them, doubt their validity, that you will believe them and be that safe person for them. And lastly, it's very important to take the time to listen and give your child the full attention. I just recently became a mom and I have never been busier than before, right? We are always busy. It's very difficult to be a parent. You're constantly checking things off of your to-do list. It's hard. It's definitely hard. And it can be difficult to say, okay, I'm going to stop for 5 minutes. I have to make dinner, but I'm going to put that on pause. I will make dinner in another 30 minutes because it seems like my child has something to tell me, right? I might want to multitask and I might want to make dinner and say, okay, Johnny, what's going on? Tell me. But then I might not be fully focused, right? So it's really important to take that time and say, okay, I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to sit with my child. I'm going to make eye contact with my child. If maybe I need to kneel down to my child's eye level, I will do that and make sure that he sees that or she sees that there isn't this power dynamic, that they can trust me and that they can talk to me, and having that space, that safe space for them to talk about these things. So lastly, right, now that we've talked a little bit about, okay, how do I talk to my child about this? Where do I start? Because sometimes that's hard, right? Like, where do I even start? These are some tips that we just discussed. But now let's say that we find out that somebody is experiencing this already. How can we help them? How can we be supportive and make sure that we're not discouraging them, that we aren't victim blaming or making the situation worse, right? That we want to be able to be a support person and not somebody that makes the situation worse. So here are some do's and don'ts, right? I would like to start off with this disclaimer that if a child talks to you about sexual assault, then it is extremely, extremely important. If, you know, they're mentioning something about somebody doing something to them that is uncomfortable, listen to them, and also reach out to your local sexual assault center, resource center, any service providers such as La Vida, for example, partnership of Chast Center, to explore if this is something that needs to be reported, right? Because when it comes to children and youth, it's really important that they get the help that they need, right? And so consent legally cannot be given for children ages 16 and under, right? So if somebody discloses that something is going on, it's important if they're a child, a minor, that we kind of explore that a little bit further and see if it's something that needs to be reported. But let's first start off with the don'ts. Like, what are some things that maybe we shouldn't be doing if somebody discloses that they are a survivor of sexual assault? What are some things that might draw somebody away instead of helping them talk about what they're experiencing? So the first thing is to try to avoid any kind of interrogating, right? Or asking the why questions. But why did this happen? Why were you there? Why were you there so late? So asking all of these why questions will really put that victim blaming piece on the survivor, right? Or it might even question their validity, which can also be very hurtful. Are you sure that happened? No. Maybe you just dreamt that it happened. Or maybe you weren't really thinking right in the moment. You had a glass of wine. So maybe that didn't happen. It's not what you thought it's not what you think it was, right? Questioning that somebody's validity can also be extremely hurtful. And also expecting a specific trauma response. We know that people experience trauma in different ways. They might fight, they might freeze, they might flight. So it really depends on each person how they're gonna experience that trauma and how they might react to it. So it's important to not expect a trauma response from somebody and then question them about it, right? And lastly, not minimizing the assault, because it's a big deal, right? Sexual assault is a crime. And so if maybe I experience sexual assault and somebody else that experienced sexual assault discloses to me what they experienced, it's important for me to not say, oh, well, my situation was worse, right? Because now we're not being empathetic. We're not putting ourselves in that person's shoes, and we're not truly trying to understand what they're experiencing by minimizing this, or it wasn't that big of a deal. He or she just tried to give you a little kiss. That's not a big deal, right? That can be extremely hurtful. Some of the things that we can do to support somebody that is experiencing sexual assault or that experienced sexual assault is to, first of all, acknowledge their courage, because it takes a lot. It takes a lot for somebody to open up, to feel comfortable, and to talk about that traumatic experience, right? So acknowledging somebody's courage can really make a world of a difference for somebody. And also believing the survivor. We talked about victim blaming a lot today and how that's a big barrier for somebody to speak out about sexual assault. So believing the survivor will make it more likely that they will actually seek help from others and that they will continue this healing process, right? They will continue talking to others about it and finding the resources that they need. Because if they maybe open up to me and I I was the first person that they opened up to, and I said, I don't believe you, or no, I question them, then it's very likely that they're not going to talk to anybody else about it, and they're not going to get the help that they need. Also focus on the feelings, right? How they're feeling, what they're experiencing, and not so much on details, because it can be very overwhelming when somebody asks you all of these details, like, oh, what time did it happen? When did it happen? Who were you with? And also trauma is the way that trauma affects their brain. It's not always in a linear form, right? Sometimes there's little gaps, and that's the way that the brain is reacting to trauma, right? So it's important to not ask all of these details, because it can also be very overwhelming. And it's also okay to allow silences. Maybe somebody might not want to talk about the sexual assault experience or trauma that they experience, but they might just want your company. They might want to be in silence with you, right? But they want to have somebody there. And so it's okay to allow silences, to not pressure somebody to continue talking about it, right? It's okay to let them know, like, I'm here for you, and I'm here to listen to whatever it is that you feel comfortable sharing with me, right? And I'm here to just sit and listen is more than enough. And definitely respecting somebody's confidentiality, right? If they came to us and trusted us in telling us what happened to them, it's important to not afterwards go tell the neighbor, go tell my best friend, go tell my aunt, my uncle, my mom, right? It's important that we keep that confidential. And obviously, if they're adults, right? If they're children, it's important to like explore, and if a report needs to be done, that we explore that further with a service provider. But if it's an adult, it's important to offer them information, offer them resources, and protect that confidentiality, right? Because they're trusting us with something that's very personal for them. And lastly, practice self-care, because it is also very heavy on us to hear trauma from somebody else, and that can cause like secondary trauma. So it's important for us to also take care of ourselves, right? And encourage the other person, the sexual assault survivor, to also practice self-care and explore that together. So that was a little bit on sexual assault. There is so much more that we can cover, especially on this special month of sexual assault awareness. But these are some resources, right? These are some resources, some websites that you can go to if you want to explore this topic further. If you want to talk to somebody from La Vida Partnership of Chast Center, you can also contact us if you want to explore this topic further. Don't forget to also be active on social media. If this is something that has inspired you, feel free to go to some of these websites. They have a lot of cool hashtags that are currently being used that you can use on your own platforms to continue this dialogue with your community and your peers. So it's really important to stay active, especially during this month, to create awareness and help survivors know that there are resources, that there is help, that they're not alone, right? Most importantly. And here is our contact information. If you have any questions, anything that you would like to discuss with us, if you would like to make an appointment. Right now, we are taking preferably over the phone appointments, but we are seeing people in person if that's something that you choose. So let us know. We can schedule an appointment, but preferably we would want you to schedule an appointment beforehand. So please make sure that you give us a call if there's anything that you would like to talk to us about. If you know of anybody that will like this service, let them know that we are here, give them our contact information, and let them know that they're not alone, that there are people that they can talk to, and that there is help available.